AskReddit by training author 9629. What are the worst rare mental disorders? Capgras delusion, where you think a close family member or friend has been replaced by an identical imposter. Nothing worse than to lose trust in someone who you're close to. I hear it's also a symptom of dementia. Body integrity disorder, big-eyed, describes the extremely rare phenomenon of persons who desire the amputation of one or more healthy limbs or who desire a paralysis. Some of these persons mutilate themselves, others ask surgeons for an amputation or for the transection of their spinal cord. There was a young woman who put bleach or drain cleaner in her eyes to blind herself, and she was quite pleased with the results. Postpartum psychosis. New mothers have murdered their children because of it. My mother thought I was born evil because sometimes I cried when not hungry or needing a new diaper, which she took for deliberate lying before I could speak. She'd hardly been around babies before I was born, was more familiar with those dolls that feed water and then change the wet diaper. Most of my early childhood was reminders that she was only taking care of me because she didn't want to go to prison for abandoning me. Like by my late teens she'd finally climbed out of that particular crazy bucket, but damn, seems like somebody shoulder taken her to a doctor way back when she first started talking about her baby being born evil. Kinda figure it started with postpartum psychosis and just got left untreated to fester for years, because her behavior towards me was really out of character for her as a person. It may not be the worst, but a kid I knew in school had trichotillomania, which is basically compulsive hair pulling. He had large patches of hair missing, and I just remember feeling sorry for him because he couldn't stop himself. I struggle with dermatillomania. It's the same thing but with skin. I basically claw holes into my skin to get rid of any non-smooth texture I feel. Alien hand syndrome. You literally cannot control one hand. You zip your coat up, the other hand undoes it. You brush your teeth, the other hand grabs it off you. My co-worker had a stroke and ended up with this. She would have to tie her one arm down. And the worst part was her hand had a thing for knives. Even tied down it would fight and twist trying to get the knife when she was cooking. Deleted. I had this when I had psychotic depression. I thought my brain was full of maggots and that it was rotting inside my skull. I could feel them wriggling and could smell this horrible rotting odor all the time. I nearly jumped headfirst from a wall onto concrete to break my head open so I could get the maggots out. Scary stuff. I'm not sure if this counts, but fatal familiar insomnia. One day you just never sleep again. Very rare and genetic. People with new insomnia swear they have it and it's posted all the time on the insomnia subband. Drives me crazy. I think there's something like 61 families with that disorder in the world. It's so rare. Capgras syndrome, a delusional disorder where individuals believe that their loved ones or familiar people have been replaced by imposters. Fregally delusion, individuals with this disorder believe that different people are actually the same person in disguise, often leading to paranoid and persecutory thoughts. Also cotard delusion, where you believe that you or your body parts are dead, dying, or don't exist. Walking corpse syndrome. You think that you're dead or don't exist with this disorder. I actually got to meet a patient with that when I was in school. He literally just walked in circles saying I am dead or I am death, over and over. And the weird part is, if you looked into his eyes, he looked dead. He couldn't hold a conversation other than telling you how he was dead and you needed to believe him. Central hyperventilation syndrome, known as Ondine's curse. https://www.youtube.com/watch?64J076A5VGQ is a neurological disorder that has an incidence of only around 1 in 30 million. But when people with this disease try to nap or sleep, they stop breathing. That means they have to be hooked up to a ventilator every single night in order to stay alive. I read this in my bed before sleep. Thanks, pal. Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Munchausen is bad enough, but in Munchausen by proxy, it's typically a parent who triggers an illness or symptoms in a kid, searches medical attention and then gets to be the caring caregiver. Meaning the kid suffers a lot from it. Edit. Sorry to everyone saying I got the name wrong and it isn't called that anymore. English is not my first language. I had to Google the English name of the syndrome and went with what I found. In German I've never heard or seen it called anything without Munchausen in it. My ex got sole custody of his older son when the kid was still a toddler because the mom was doing that to him. Nobody ever told me details and luckily Stepson doesn't remember. CTE. But it's not rare, just rarely diagnosed, and only diagnosed upon death. Degenerative brain damage caused by concussions. First you lose control of your emotions. Immediate anger, no ability to say let me step back and examine the situation, then memory loss. Then you lose all impulse control. Your first thoughts you do them. Yelling at people, punching people, drugs, drinking. Then you lose control of your bodily functions. Tremors, vertigo, swallowing, walking, incontinence. My brother had it. Diagnosed after death at stage 2. During striking moments of lucidity he would sob and tell our mom there's something in my head. Paranoid personality disorder. The tragedy of it is that no one who has it wants to get help. My dad has traits of this but due to trauma from the bloody county government in the sticks. Plus people being hateful and abusing him over the decades which made it worse. It is heartbreaking to read some of these comments. Yes it is. Some peoples have very bad luck. IDK if it counts as a mental disorder but childhood dementia. It's one thing when your child is born disabled but seeing them be born normal then slowly lose their abilities to do basic stuff must be heart-wrenching. OCD. Many people aren't really aware of what OCD actually is and just how bad it is. They use it flippantly to just describe anal retentive behavior. I have a variation of this and it is crushing. Someone I used to know who has full-blown OCD called it the what if disease and I think that it is the most descriptive and accurate portrait of the disorder so far. Capgras syndrome. My husband's ex-uncle brutally murdered his parents because he thought they were Satan. Ex-uncle? Certain cases of hallucinogen persistent perception disorder. It is a rare side effect of taking a psychedelic drug like LSD. Also known as permanent trip, it has varied degrees of severity and distress levels but some people are basically stuck in a bad trip for years. Terrifying hallucinations and delusions. I have a mild version from psychedelic mushrooms that isn't distressing but is persistent and distracting. I basically see mild visual distortions all the time, shapes moving and waving, seeing fractals, more colorful lights, etc. I had this problem for years. When I was in high school, I took psychedelics all the time. For a very long time after I had quit doing them, everything was always moving. In dimly lit rooms, I'd see patterns and colors. After a while it became less intense and appeared grainy and pixelated. Now I can only see slight movements on walls in low light settings, so it's no longer distracting. I don't dare sleep in complete darkness anymore, though. Pique. An eating disorder where you crave and or eat things that aren't food. My mom had this. She would chew on hair ties and rubber bands. Would want to eat dirt but realistically knew she shouldn't. Turns out she was anemic and the pique was a symptom. With iron infusions it went away. Some of these ones I'm reading here sounding like science fiction. Yet people suffer unimaginable things. Removed. I'm a therapist and currently work with a woman that has compulsions to eat the skin on her hands and arms. She admits she'd try to consume the skin on other parts of her body but she is physically disabled. Prior to working with her, she was chewing her lips and cheeks away. Fortunately, she's responding well to therapy and meds. Abilify and a supplement called N-acetylcysteine have been a game changer for her. There was a woman who lost her sense of proprioception, i.e. the body's sense of itself. The way she described it is horrifying. I can't identify with that graceful girl anymore. She's gone. I can't remember her. I can't even imagine her. It's like something's been scooped right out of me, right at the center. That's what they do with frogs, isn't it? They scoop out the center, the spinal cord, they pith them. That's what I am, pithed, like a frog. Step up, come and see Chris, the first pithed human being. She's no proprioception, no sense of herself. Disembodied Chris, the pithed girl. https://kavapri/sethu.medium.com/making-sense-of-4C659F39709E. Neurological damage. She was an athlete and had some kind of accident. Not really what I would consider a mental disorder, though it is definitely frightening as hell. Truman syndrome, wherein the sufferer always perceives or feels an audience watching their every move, even if no other people are present. I grew up in religion, and as a child I took God always can see what you do to a whole new level. I even felt violated just bathing because I would be naked and think God will see this. It was an endless problem, and still today I have thoughts like that I ignore to keep myself somewhat sane. Selective mutism makes it almost impossible to talk in public. I have a classmate who's had this my whole time knowing him, only speaks to select people around select people. And I think the worst part from the outside was the constant nagging of teachers. They didn't understand he wasn't just shy, he could not talk in the moment. Had to go in and offend him to substitute teachers a few times because it got on my nerves. Alien hand syndrome sounds pretty frightening to me. It's when you believe that one of your hands has a mind of its own and acts without you being able to stop it or control it. People who have this medical condition have a hand that often acts contrary to their own intentions. I've seen a video of someone whose own hand had a firm grip around the throat and tried to strangle the person, while he was fighting to remove the hand with the other hand. Super scary.